my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. And I want to extend that respect to other Torres Strait Islanders and Indigenous and Aboriginal Australians participating tonight. So tonight we're going to have the findings of Team Nic engagements from over the last 6 months, from 1st of June through to basically today, the 28th of November. This will actually mark possibly 100 days until the election that sees us determining the 48th Parliament, who knows? But it's an absolute great pleasure to spend part of my evening with you all. Either you're an interested stakeholder or you are already a democracy worker, but everyone is welcome. So over to the overview. Thank you, Kerry. Tonight's presentation is going to go for about 15 minutes. That's a little ding to Kerry to move on to the next slide, please. Just if you click on the screen, it should just, there we are, beautiful. It's going to go for about 15 minutes. I'm going to cover why we engage, how we engage, what we've heard and learned, what's next, and then it's going to be your turn as well to share. Next slide. First, some housekeeping. It is being recorded tonight, this presentation, and when it's done, it'll be uploaded, I imagine, with some captions, closed captions, to my YouTube channel. As you've been told already, that the chat and participant video is just turned off until the end of the presentation in about 15 minutes' time. If you have your questions and comments ready, that's going to be great, and you'll be able to either raise your hand and ask in real time, or if you're feeling shy, you can also just pop your questions in the chat, or any comments as well are completely welcome. Okay, so next slide. Why engage? What is the purpose of all of this? Why listen to the community? It might seem obvious, but I think it's kind of important to start from first principles, why we listen to the community at all. Thank you, Kerry. Next one. Listening and action, in my opinion, is what people really, really want, and they deserve, right? But their current representation really fails to do that. And it probably goes to why we're seeing the slow erosion of first preferences flowing to the major parties over the last 30 years. I think people are just really dissatisfied with the quality of representation. They're just not seeing their values represented in the parliament. They're not having their voices heard. So as a community independent, I'm driven to stand for election so that I can take the community's voice and our issues to parliament. I think that's why it's important that I know what the issues are, and that matter to our community. And that's why I've been listening with a really broad range of people from Team Nic. And I think that's these 4 things that are on this slide here, listening because it's what MPs frankly need to do as part of their job description and to fulfill their role. I believe that there is an absolute ton of thoughtful experience in our community from which we can learn. It's not technically possible to be aware of every issue of concern across all the different types of communities that exist in this fabulous electorate. So by engaging, I find these out, and the community concerns change over time. So engaging enables me to recalibrate the currency of knowledge and, I suppose, reorder priorities as the community's interests also change. Okay, so how we engage. What methods do we use? Thank you, Kerry. 2 more slides. So as someone who's not yet elected, I have limited resources available. So the campaign makes best use of the following methods. Door knocking, community surveys, email and online contact form, info@nicoletteboer.com.au, kitchen table conversations, and input from other stakeholders and experts. Now, just quickly, I want to run through these in terms of research methods. Door knocking is not self-selecting, so you can literally have anyone in the electorate who opens the door with whom you engage. So although it's slow and it requires a lot of willing helpers to get it done, you'll see when I present these that the results from the door knocking is a lot more representative of the cross section of the community. So because we go to them and somewhat entice them to engage, we're getting the people that we're not getting when we're talking at train stations, for example. It's a very effective way of getting down into the grit about the things that matter to the people who live here. So the community survey is on our website. It's cheap and it's flexible, but it does tend to be self-selecting. So only really motivated people, either for or against issues, are going to fill that out and give me a piece of their mind. And you'll see too when I present these that things that the results from that really tilt towards, for example, climate and the environment as a top issue, as opposed to in door knocking where it comes in third. So then there's the info at nicolettebuller.com.au, or basically an email address or an online contact form on the website. It's also easy to set up and quite cheap to run, but in terms of, and self-selecting, but it does require some of our very talented volunteers to help me work through and respond to those in hopefully an increasingly timely fashion and with great detail. Some of the topics are quite demanding and require to be much more informed, I suppose. And it's really interesting that the people that write in do skew blokes. Kitchen table conversations, it's a proven method of engagement and learning. The cons are that it requires commitment to set it up, and it asks a lot of people and their precious time to commit to participate in them. They can be anywhere between 90 minutes to 2 hours so that we can really go deeply and unpack issues. Personally, I found this a really great opportunity. We ran 8 of these around the middle of the year to unpack what it meant when people said that they were feeling the pinch from cost of living. You know, what is that? It meant so many different things to different people. So the kitchen table conversation gave us the opportunity to drill into that. And then inputs from other stakeholders and experts. These are kind of local specific community experts like the Chambers of Commerce, Provis, our very own STEP, Rotary, Voices of Bradfield. It does require commitment to set up, but these fantastic groups distill and focus particular issues that make it easy for me to get across segments of knowledge and issues in the community. So they're really useful. The only thing to be concerned about or look out for is that some of the groups go across constituents that might be outside of Bradfield. So anyway, they're just some of the methods. Thank you, Kerry. Some of the things that we're not talking about tonight are focus groups and polling. And to be clear, we haven't commissioned any of our own focus groups or polling. We are a grassroots information from the ground up. We don't do policy by focus group. Having said that, kitchen table conversations are pretty close to what those are, as in some ways, but I won't be talking about focus groups and polling tonight. So next slide. I think it's probably worth mentioning that apart from the methods I've just described, if I have the privilege of being your Member of Parliament, I will still be using those. And thank you, Kerry. I will also add issue-focused surveys and polls to engagement, for example, using WhatsApp or other online techniques. In-person town halls, particularly for complex issues or bills or acts of forthcoming legislation that need some explanation and engagement. And then for 1 or 2 issues each year, funding, allowing some deliberative processes that are like citizens' assemblies that go deep into unpacking complex ideas, engaging people, and us putting together recommendations that I can take to Parliament to represent and put forward particular viewpoints, for example, on housing. Right. That's a little bit of the methods, I suppose, that we do on engagement. And now I want to share with you for the last part of the presentation what we've heard and what we've learned, or the findings. I'm going to keep some of the numbers back. I'm not going to share all of our secrets this time. Obviously, if I have the privilege of being elected, it's open slather. All the data is available to everybody. But for now, just going to give you the thematics and a little bit about how we're going on door knocking. So door knocking is where we're going to start. And since September the 1st, we've knocked nearly 4,500 doors and had conversations with around half those people. That's 2,152 conversations at people's doors. It's about 15% of what I call knockable doors. So they're the ones we can access. Unfortunately, we have some challenges getting into particularly high-rise residential where you might have a key card in order to access a particular level of a building. So we're not able to knock, readily contact and turn up on those people's doorsteps. The awareness of me is really good. It's nearly 40%, and we haven't done any advertising yet, which is great, but we will continue to knock doors right up until polling day. So from the door knocking, thank you, Kerry, the two dominant issues that we are hearing about is housing, particularly around because of the state government's transport-oriented design SEP and the impacts that's happening at the top end of the electorate in the Ku-ring-gai Municipal Council in particular, and cost of living, followed very closely by climate. But if you can see, if you unpack the cost of living, it's things like childcare, education costs, electricity bills going up, food, groceries, mortgage and rent, transport, and that's principally filling up cars with petrol, insurance and tertiary fees for university students. So these are, I'm probably going to, I have put in some after climate, I've put in a few extra bits there, dissatisfaction with major parties, integrity, the NDIS also comes up, aged care, immigration, pre-loss, and a number of other local issues that like traffic congestion, potholes, and footpaths. These are all issues that people share with us at their front door. Okay, so what are we hearing on housing? Here are some typical quotes that we hear at door knocks, and I've chosen these specifically because I believe that they're genuinely representative of what people are telling, well, not just me, but the other door knockers. So what we're hearing on housing is that people support policies that favour equitable access to critical services such as housing, health, and education. And what I'm hearing time and time again are things that teachers that work in our schools, people in aged care working at aged care facilities, even people working in the many hospitals that are part of our electorate may not be living nearby because they can't find affordable homes to rent or buy, and they're travelling quite a long distance to come every day to work here in Bradfield. So that is really unhelpful. Also hearing it from small business owners, even the local barista trying to find someone who wants to come and work in his business is really hard. So the rising cost of housing is also dividing Australian society into two. You'll hear that again across these issues. This is this intergenerational equity piece, as well as those that do and don't have property or don't have access to the bank of mum and dad who have property. And then this other one, I want my grandchildren to enjoy a livable earth, have satisfactory education, jobs, and housing. And that's that real desire, particularly for our seniors, to be able to give their legacy, to hand on a lifestyle, a planet that's as good as, if not better than what they had. And that just seems like a real pipe dream, particularly given the housing crisis that we are experiencing. So the next one, what we're hearing on the cost of living, I think these are relatively self-explanatory. Daycare is coming in really highly for people with young children. It's not just too high, it's really, really expensive, and people are bringing their parents in to take over some of that daycare, anywhere between 1, 2, and 3 days a week. And that has other implications from family lifestyle as well. Mortgage rates need to come down. We're feeling the pinch. That's something we hear time and time again. And for the younger people, I don't even worry about housing. It's an impossible dream while I have my HECS debt. And it's not just the people under 25 that feel frustration that they don't have what it takes financially to move out of home. The parents are also getting a little bit shirty that their kids can't move out. So I wanted to put this next slide together about the other issues that we're hearing. I think there's it goes to the deep cynicism about party politicians. And I don't think, I mean, it possibly does extend also to independents, but I'm hearing it very much about the parties. People have stopped hoping or even believing in the role of government at all, and just don't trust politicians to tell the truth or to get done what needs to get done for them. So some of the things that we're hearing here are, I want more sensible discussions on important issues than just opposing each other. They're both the same. And that's that blame game that we see time and time again, that toxic behaviour in question time, just point scoring for the political theatre of it. We're also hearing that politicians aren't interested in us. I've never met whoever is our local bloke. And that's really interesting, actually, because we're at people's doorsteps having a conversation with them. And sometimes we hear, hey, when's the election? And so, well, it could be March, it could be May, who knows? You're already out talking to us. And, our door knockers go, yep. And they say, wow, this is the first time in the 25 years I've lived in Bradfield that any politicians come to ask me my view. And frankly, you've basically got my vote just for turning up. So there is this sort of, I suppose, discontent with the status quo. And this one too, and I'm hearing the word entitlement come out more and more often, particularly in the last 2 or 3 months, that Liberals expect to be rewarded for doing their job, that they're all bought and paid for. Not just Liberals, we also do hear discontent with Labor, particularly after they decided to go hard on opening or extending coal mines, that the fact that parties are bought and paid for is coming out at people's doors. So, I think that's probably enough for door knocking. Thank you, Kerry. Let's go and have a look at the community survey. So the survey lives on our website and it's accessible with the QR code that we've provided on flyers. We've put a flyer out to the Willoughby area, which is the southern end of what we call affectionately Bradfield 2.0. It's essentially the current part of North Sydney that will come to Bradfield at the next election. We've also put out our survey on social media and in local independent media like The Post to encourage people to share their views with us here at Team Nic. So there's 6 to 11 questions, and what you're seeing on the slide here are some of the issues that we've put in the drop-down menu. People can tick. We'll invite them to select the top 5 things that are of issues to them, and there's also this free form area where they can share with us what their issues are, and in a minute I'll show you what they are. Okay, as I mentioned in the introduction, first of all, climate change and environmental sustainability, 27%. This is the biggest one by far. Remember, though, the community survey is self-selecting, and I probably should also say that the community survey has been done in English, and in the last 4 weeks, we've also had it in traditional and simplified Chinese. The English one is basically almost every single survey. The engagement with people with the survey in Chinese has not, let's just say I think we're going to fail fast on this one. I'm not sure, maybe it's just the distance is too short, 4 weeks, that we haven't had the kind of volume I was hoping for from our Chinese speakers. So we'll find another way to try and engage them. It's probably not this survey. But what we're hearing is that climate change and environment is by far the biggest area. And you can see in these comments the intersection with cost of living. Climate change affects everybody, from the cost of groceries to immigration and health. Immediate action to address man-made climate is the only way to ensure a habitable world for future generations. Can you see the cost of living and the intergenerational equity? These themes just come across every single topic. And I think the housing affordability and availability is also a really big issue. The rising cost of housing is dividing Australian society into 2. That's that same intergenerational equity, cost of living aspects. Thank you, Kerry. So the other issues in the survey I just wanted to point out, which are kind of come up a little bit lower at 87%, but are really kind of interesting. And unfortunately, I only want to fit them onto a slide, but there are lots of really interesting quotes. The major parties struggle to address these issues with real substance. That's political integrity and governance. We need truth in political statements and advertising to try and re-establish honesty in politics. And that, in my opinion, goes to the root of all of this, is that trust has broken down between people and the Institute of our Parliament and those politicians that allegedly represent us in Parliament. Media concentration and capture is also one in the free form that comes up a lot. People see the impact of changing media, and not only media concentration, but also the fact that a lot of people now are getting their news on social media, which has a completely different, I suppose, modus operandi in terms of, the algorithm that feeds you the most, the cutest cat picture or the most outrageous statement by a politician. So independent journalism and entertainment reflecting Australia is vital. We absolutely need an independent media. And social equity and inequality, our society is becoming more and more inequitable, which can only lead to misery and disaffected people. And then the final two ones I want to share with you out of the survey is around education funding and accessibility. And as many of you who are living in Bradfield will know, that we were the only Liberal seat in the nation to return a yes majority at the referendum last year. And so it is interesting to report from the survey, at least for people who are engaged, that First Nations advancement or closing the gap remains a top issue for people. Okay, I did say 15 minutes. I'm going to quickly move on to the next one, which is the email that inbox. And we have wonderful people that help to moderate the receipt of those. Compared to door knocking, it's not a large volume, but it keeps our volunteers really busy. And I've classified them into 3 areas: local issues, national issues, and then specifically political or campaign-related issues. So you can just see some of those there. And they're the main issues. You can see some of them are local. There's natural versus synthetic turf for sports fields. And political and campaign issues are also, particularly around donation reform, have started coming in. The last 2 areas, stakeholder and expert inputs, such as Voices of Bradfield, that surveys the electorate every year. I wanted to report on that, but unfortunately, they don't have their 2024 survey done in time for this town hall tonight. But I will be helping promote the findings of that once they publish it. And kitchen table conversations, as I've already mentioned, really informal ways that allow me to unpack issues. It's a really safe arena, someone's kitchen table, cup of tea, or in some cases, a glass of wine. And I particularly found it useful for hearing from the under 30-year-olds. They don't often open the doors when we door knock. They're very tricky to engage meaningfully on social media, apart from signing a petition. So the types of things we're hearing is like, what's it like to still be living at home? How significant is your help or your HECS debt to your sense of getting ahead in life? What's your view on nuclear energy? And what are your experiences with mental health? These are the kinds of things that we get to ask people around a kitchen table. So what's next? Implications from all of this. Naturally, what we do now will be what is possible with the precious resources that are afforded to us, mostly via our volunteers. I can't stress enough the importance of this information that we've collected from the door knocking, which gives us a more representative feel of the issues across the different postcodes, with many people, and not just those that are engaged directly in politics through the surveys, for example. What do I do with all of this data? Well, we're going to keep collecting it and building on it, because we need to find out more about the views of people in the newer areas of Bradfield, particularly what we refer to the Willoughby area, the newer parts that were not in 2022 part of the electorate. That's really important to get down and do some really active listening. And also, we're going to continue being in action because the data changes. It changes even how housing has now pipped cost of living into first place almost. It's quite neck on neck, and they're related. But in the 6 months that we've started collecting data, and that's largely because of the state government's transport-oriented development plans that impact the Ku-ring-gai area and Willoughby as well, but that's why that's happened. So keeping up to date with the changing priorities. And we use this to put together the platform then that I take to the election. as the community independent here in Bradfield. And if I'm elected, I can use that data to input to my decisions around what issues are salient in any possible negotiation if Australia turns a minority government needing the support of a crossbench comprising of an independent member of Bradfield, for example. So by having all of this really solid engagement, this data, it means that I'll be in a much stronger position to know what priorities to lean into should we find ourselves as Bradfield in that enviable place in the 48th Parliament. That's why it's really, really super important to continue collecting this data. Okay.